Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Facebook Live, Stay Healthy Doctor Talk. It's our first session for 2020.
21.
Yeah, 2021, sorry. Well, today we have a very relevant topic that I think is going to be quite important for all of us. You know, whether we are here in Thailand or anywhere else in the world, who we are, what we're doing, I think this is a very relevant topic. As you can see, our topic is coping with stress during COVID-19 pandemic. We're very happy to have with us here Dr. Jinda Udompanyawit, who is a family physician and therapist here at Bumrungrad International. Welcome, Dr. Jinda.
Thank you, Dr. Eliseo.
So tell us what types of illnesses do you see, or what types of patients do you help, and what do you help them with? Just to introduce yourself.
Yes, so I'm actually practicing a lot of family therapy and individual therapy as well as couples therapy for patients who have conflict in the home, or sometimes they have medical illnesses. I deal a lot with cancer patients, and especially if they're in their advanced stage or dying stage, I help them as a family to overcome the stress and the mental issues that arise when there is these type of issues going on. So this is what I've been doing.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, with the current state of COVID-19, you know, COVID-19 was unheard of a year and a half ago.
Yes.
And as we all know, it has affected our lives many more ways than in, you know, in some people it might be a lot of changes in their lives, and some people, they might not even know that they have been affected by COVID.
Yes. And
some people's lives have been changed, and some people's lives are still just going on as usual. Mm-hmm. How, you know, has COVID changed the way, I mean, the types of patients that you see? Mm-hmm. Have you seen this affecting the people, and, you know, how do they actually come to you? You know, what are the problems that they come to you with?
There has been definitely a change in what I've been seeing, and it's palpable. I think a lot of times when I was still working with patients previous to COVID-19, I noticed that in terms of relationships, patients would come in with maybe not so much of conflict, but maybe affairs or loneliness or things like that. But once they are locked down or in quarantine, somehow there's more anxiety, there's more conflicts within the home, and they come in because of communication issues. On a personal level, there's been maybe sometimes because of the loss of safety and stability, threat of sickness and death, there's been anxiety, and some get really worried. And due to the socioeconomic issues that's been ongoing now, there's been a lot of maybe some depression as well that's been happening. Mm-hmm. It's affecting mostly people who originally have mental health issues. Mm-hmm. That's been whether it's social distancing or lockdown or quarantine, right, that has really aggravated their right. illness. Right. Or if there's already family dynamics mm-hmm. that are not very good, then okay. this happened like that. Yeah.
So you're saying that there's a change in the way people come to you, what they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. So how does this actually affect us? Can you explain that to us? You know, how does a situation like social distancing, you know, having to wear masks, going through changes in your lives, how does this affect us? And how do you explain that, you know?
Mm-hmm. How's it explained is we, in having I look at it from a lens of the loss. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a loss definitely, maybe from a loved one. Mm-hmm. For certain people who are going through illness and then suddenly lose a loved one through COVID, mm-hmm. that's real threat and danger that suddenly triggers a part of our brain called the amygdala. And then this amygdala, which is in the middle part of the brain, it triggers this flight or fight response because it's danger, you know. For some of us, it doesn't trigger that much. Maybe it's a loss of a certainty, and there's uncertainty, and the routine has been changed. And we're creatures of habits. So once this all change and it feels like there's danger, and we're in this kind of like a state where we are feeling like we've been triggered, then negative feelings like anxiety or fear or sadness, things like that can override and get through to us. I call this where we would be in a state of hyperarousal. I see that a lot where patients have anxiety and hypervigilance. They are always feeling like there's a fight or flight within them, and it could get really chaotic. But at the same time, some people will shut down, and this is called hypoarousal, and they can feel numb or they can freeze, and just go into a mode of not feeling anything or pushing it all down into their bodies. But what we would like to see is that people can slowly come out of that and be grounded, be more flexible, and have that window of tolerance.
So you're saying that there are two extremes.
Yes.
where it's not good,
Yes.
and this causes effects onto our bodies and the way we act and the way we respond.
Yes, the way we act is true. We call this unhealthy coping, which once a person feels that they're in danger, they can couple it with and they can't go anywhere. It's like they can't fight, they can't flight, so they freeze. And sometimes this energy that's built up in them, it turns into fear. And it sometimes feels like, I don't want to feel this fear. So some people then go into a hypoarousal state where they escape and they numb themselves, or sometimes they just they want an instant high so that they could just avoid. So there's this avoidance behavior. But some become hyperaroused and hypervigilant, so they, keep searching the internet for information or try to control, not to prevent disaster from happening to them, so they buy and hoard. So this can happen. And this is, if it continues to happen on and on, where you don't really address your fear or really address the root of why you're feeling all of this and how come you're so triggered, then it could become an addictive spiral and becomes compounded. And then finally, if we're through times that now we're going through it continuously, because this is a war, and most wars do run in years, as we've seen in the past, where history shows us in this chronic state, it could feel like there's a stuck sense of helplessness. And then this stuck sense of helplessness, we are mostly now concerned that there might be what we call a post-traumatic stress disorder as well.
That's very interesting. The way you put it, that COVID-19 is like us experiencing a war, and because of this COVID-19 being part of our lives for a long time, then many of us could start experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
This is very interesting because the term post-traumatic stress disorder comes from an event, life-changing event, or life-changing events that change you and the way you think and the way you react. You see, this usually, what I know is what war veterans experience, or people who have experienced severe loss, dramatic changes in their life, and it changes them and it affects them for a long time. If they don't get help, and it really messes up the life.
Yes, the study of post-traumatic stress disorder started with war veterans, where they see that sometimes after they've come back from the war, they notice that they have been, they're still having flashbacks about the scenes that happened during the wartime. They're still more prone to certain sounds or certain things that trigger them into the past, and it becomes distressing memories. Sometimes they have nightmares, and they still surround themselves with people talking about what has happened in the past. And this could certainly be something that we could see might be happening with the COVID-19 war that we're fighting with the virus, where lots of things has happened, and there's probably memories that become distressing. Of course, PTSD now, we are finding that even some people have these symptoms not because of war, but certain things that happen in their lives, maybe loss of a loved ones and things like that, but also minor things as well. It depends on the meaning making that it happens for that person, or if that person is vulnerable, like children, or have mental health issues. And we see that in the times that has happened in the many in history. This is something very interesting I see, because as a family therapist I also think in systems, and we see that people have passed through wars, phase of war, and then alternate with phase of the era of awakening. I could see that there's like maybe a 20-year gap in between, and then they go back into this cycle of maybe another war, a depression, you know. And then we also had gone through a phase of awakening where there's a lot of new technology that has come up, and so the generation that has passed through this awakening now goes through now this war, and we are wondering that if the trauma can be at least resolved, or the fear could be resolved, we can see that the next time the awakening comes, it might be very good. But sometimes we can see that people who have gone through war before, like World War II, generations that are like baby boomers or before that, you can see some behaviors of like they're still afraid of the not having enough to eat, or need to hoard things or keep things, can't throw away things. And the generation after that are like, why is my grandpa like this? Why is he not, why can't he just throw things away? And that the new generation doesn't understand. So I see that both in a collective level and also a family level. And I wonder how this COVID war is going to result, because we are now having to wear masks all the time. And I wonder if later on, as we have newer generations, they might go like, why is grandpa and grandma so hygienic? Why are they so afraid of germs, you know? Yeah, so this could happen as well, unless we kind of maybe work through our trauma and resolve and transform.
Social distancing is a term that has popped up, I think, in just the past year, although social distancing in a way has already been in place to prevent a lot of illnesses from spreading. But the term social distancing was new to me. How does this affect us? You know, how does it affect our lives and us personally? How does it affect us?
Yeah, actually humans, we are wired to connect. So I talked about the amygdala, where we have this fight and flight response. But we are also wired to connect and be regulated emotionally with our loved ones. As long as we have someone beside us, we feel more safe. And so the problem with going through war is it feels like it's not safe. But in the past, when we go through war, we still feel that we have each other. We can be with each other. But now with the COVID-19, it's really a phenomenon because we have to social distance. Luckily, we have the internet and technology to still bond us together in some way. But still, physical touch and closeness is still important. And especially if people are stuck with living alone, or people are stuck in a family that are not having healthy relationships, this could be quite traumatic as well. So at this point in time, this group of people need pretty much some attention to, you know, be able to regulate themselves through this fearful time. Yes.
Okay. Now, how do we actually cope with this? Because it's going to be with us for a long time. Social distancing, lockdown, it will come and go. In some countries, they're in full lockdown. We are starting to, here in Thailand, are starting to open up. Schools are going to be starting tomorrow, on Monday.
Yes.
Traffic's probably going to be back to normal already. But it's going to be part of our lives. And so how do we actually deal with the stress of uncertainty, dealing with changes in our lives, changes when we lose a loved one because of COVID, and how can we strengthen ourselves to deal with this?
Actually, the good news is people are mostly resilient, and whatever that's happened, whatever stress that has occurred, although it could be shocking, people do get better on their own. Even I see a sense that there's a shift after the initial shock of the trauma. People do have to get their bearings again, like get themselves oriented, what am I going to do? And then they start to have these new terms like the new normal, things like that. And that creates such a kind of like another sense of stability that, okay, we're going to go into this kind of routine. And then now everyone's used to wearing masks and, you know, rubbing in alcohol and things like that. So we see that most will get better on their own. Of course, we see that sometimes people will have from the very beginning a curve that goes down, like how they react and their behavior, as I've explained previously. But if they've reached that new normal where they feel like they could survive, they can adapt, then it goes up to maybe they could feel that they can recover and there'll be growth. And in this, I call it resilience, where there's flexibility during difficult times. And this is a time when there was fear and you were freezing in an immobilized state. And suddenly you start to reframe that. You say, hey, I'm not defeated. There's opportunity here. We can fight. We can, we're not alone here, you know. We can be a role model. We can grow through this. So the key point here, and this is a big concept before I go into the what we do, is that we, as a community, you know, move through this through compassionate communication and positivity and compassion. You know, we allow each other to cope, maybe unhealthily at first, because we understand that in being resilient, sometimes you might feel all those negativity, but you'll pull through. You'll help each other pull through. So allowing each other to go through that in a safe space, and then slowly finding ways to calm down, be stable, and then you can find ways. So this is where I can show you here in this diagram, where at first the red arrow is like the trauma is so big and you don't have resources to cope with it, so you go into this unhealthy behavior for a while. But then after a while you start to find things and they become more equal, where you have enough resources within you to be as big as the trauma, and finally bigger than the trauma. And this is how we get through.
So how do we actually start?
So as I've said, you know, the first, we call this psychological first aid, where the first thing we have to do is the basic, is create that sense of safety. Yes, we're not out of the woods as much yet, but the vaccine does give us hope. So at first we just have to create that sense of safety and stability. And the first thing is, as I've said, is the new normal, the powerful routines that we can do. Either we go into lockdown or quarantine, try as much as possible to adapt until it becomes some sort of a routine for us, or even the way we protect ourselves. It becomes a routine. I know that when I get out, I take care of myself, but when I go into the house, I might have to take off my clothes, wash my hands, and things like that, you know. But try to maintain a routine that is not as different, as like totally different or as drastically different than the usual. If you have to work at home, try to still maintain that routine of waking up, eating as a family, and then as you go to work, usually you go outside, but you're in the home, maybe restructure your home in a way that you can still have that privacy in the workplace from your kids. So you still have that sense of normalcy in an adaptive way. So that means you might have to set boundaries and talk to your family when you're working at home. If kids are online schooling, you might renegotiate roles and responsibility. If it becomes too much at times, you can still say, okay, I can't do this. Feel okay to say no, and people around you can also feel okay that, you know, you can't do it. So if we have that kind of understanding between each other, I think that's the first thing. We feel safe with each other. We feel safe with the circumstances.
So we stabilize ourselves by starting some form of routine.
Yes.
Because it's the changes that produce these stresses. And if we can establish routine in our own lives, in our families, and that creates a sense of safety
and stability,
that will reduce our stress to a certain degree.
Yes. Also, another thing that we notice, which some countries have coined COVID stress syndrome, is that there's been one of the highlights of this stress syndrome, like the symptoms that we notice is so much of the social media seeking and reassuring of safety. So there's a information overload that happens. And so that creates unnecessary stress as well. And also we've come to realize sometimes on the internet, some of the information are not really true, or can be true and cannot be true. It's just so confusing sometimes. So another rule of thumb is to just, have adequate, like go through your information in a way that you filter it. Get the sources that are really like reliable, but not just read everything and in a panic state. If you're in a panic state, don't go reading these things. Work with yourself first. So once you go through the information, look at which one is facts, which one is just stories, and filter it. And just stick to the facts, and then make up your mind. That's the important thing. Sometimes you read, and then you're like, I don't know what to do, Go and talk to people, make up your mind, set up your routine. If you want to protect. If you want to do this and that to increase your immune system or increase your health, just do that. Yeah. Once you have that, then I feel like most of the people can be resilient in that way. But sometimes there's this emotional component which people come in and feel like they can't deal with their emotions. They become easily irritated. They have these angry outbursts. They have panic attacks. And I have a lot more of those. Or sometimes they have body sensations that are really weird coming in. And I would ask them to work with me in doing some stabilization techniques too.
So you can actually stabilize yourself, your own emotions when you feel that these things are coming to you. You're starting to feel unusually jittery or not normal. Then you're able to stabilize yourself.
Yes, there's some really there's some techniques that we've done for patients who have trauma, because once you get triggered at that amygdala level and at a chronic state or a long time, sometimes you're in this hyperarousal state all the time. And how to really stabilize it is not just a psychological matter, but also a physiologic matter, where your sympathetic system has been activated for a long time. So we do grounding techniques, because sometimes you're still being reminded of what's happened in the past and these things are still triggering you. So grounding is bringing you into the present state. So one of the things that I do is ask patients when they are going to, they're in that state of really like the environment is surreal. They're feeling that sensation of flooding, to ground themselves by 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So 5 is what 5 things you see in this room. What 5 things do you see in this room, Dr. Alicia?
Well, I see you. I see the chairs. Everybody else here in the studio.
Yes. So yes, I quickly let you move from that state where you might be very ruminating in thoughts and your feelings are overwhelming you, and you don't. It's almost as if you're lifted off your feet. You can't get a grounding. To really ground yourself in the room, like, okay, what do you see? So you're projecting your thoughts outward now to orientate yourself about where you are. This is the first thing. Then I ask, what are the 4 things you can touch around you and feel around you? Like maybe put your hand, and this is projecting into your hand the feelings that you feel. Maybe the chair, maybe the back of this chair, a water bottle, something cold, This will help you, or again, take you out of that thought flooding sensation to really grounding yourself. Sometimes, what are you doing? Sitting in the chair, your feet is on the floor, things like that. Okay. Yes, and then 3 is maybe like, what are you hearing, and things like that. And some people find sounds really comforting and stillness really helping them feel still. Then after their grounding, which is very quick, then I let them do certain techniques of breathing, where in order to slow down the sympathetic, I help them activate the parasympathetic system. And in doing this, I let them breathe in, maybe at a count of 4, and out at a count of 7. So the exhalation is longer than the inhalation. And this will stimulate the parasympathetic system so that the heart rate goes down, your muscles relaxed, and then maybe do a body scan where it's tense and to clear up all the tenseness. But the last thing I help them do, as well as they are breathing like that and calming themselves down, is the butterfly hug. And this is a technique that we borrow from the EMDR, School of Treating Trauma, where you tap bilaterally like this, or you can do like this. Yeah. This is tapping stimulates both sides of the brain, and as you breathe, it's very, very relaxing. Yeah. So these are the three things that I initially do advise my patients to stabilize themselves, and I've gotten good reports that it does take them out of that hypervigilant state for sure. And then after a while, I let them go through an exercise that maybe think of a safe place, an inner safe place where you can connect to and feel really calm. And it's amazing, some people connect to nature, like a forest, the sea, or their rooms. A lot of people connect to their rooms. They would feel really safe in their rooms. So sometime in that feeling of not feeling safe, we connect to something safe inside of us and then continue to do that butterfly. So that really helps. Yes.
Wow, so those are very interesting techniques.
Yes. And then when patients are now stabilized, then they could achieve a state of mind where they can be having clarity, maybe clarity of what they want to do, the priorities they want to set, you know. Because as long as we're in that mental state where we're in this fight or flight or freeze mode and we're still hyper aroused, we cannot be clear about what to do, and it just keeps on in that cycle. But once we have the clarity, we might know that, okay, we have to release control, you know. Then I help them practice gratitude, self-compassion, and then joy. And finally, they might be able to come up with creative ways or creativity in order to work out their routines again, or what activities to do with the family, how to bring joy in life again, even though the situation is like this. You know, how to be creative in the socio-economic situation with their employees who are, you know, wanting to, who are panicking, for example. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So there are techniques when you feel yourself in a panic, when you feel that things are going out of control, and you know, when people feel that their world is spinning,
Yes.
you can use these simple techniques. Does it have to be step by step?
No, actually,
Or all of them, or one technique or another?
I ask them to start to get used to it, practice it on a daily basis, because it does take time for the neuron networks in their brain to connect to the sense of calmness that you practice every day. And once you're able to connect more and more to your inner safe place, that neural network is activated more often. It becomes quick to access. And when you are really flooding, like you're having a fight with a friend, or you heard the news and you're shocked, you know, you can remember to access this in a very quick way. And when you do that, it's not step by step, it's all in one. You ground yourself, you touch, you breathe, you do butterfly. It's so quick. And it's up to that person, whatever works. Because so that's why you need to explore and practice, so you know what really works. And there's more techniques than this. And so if patients come back to me and say, this still doesn't really work, I help them with other things. I also help them do mind-body exercises, because, you know, a lot of these sensations come through your body. So as long as you can be oriented to the body, and this is the thing, in this generation, a lot of people are more oriented to the thoughts. They're just all fixated in the thought. They forgot about their body. And then when their body activates, they don't even know. And then they get scared. So I help them to realize that this is happening in their body, and that they could actually help their body calm down. It's fine. It's not the end of the world feeling that they feel. They can make it better. And some mind-body exercises are like yoga, Tai Chi. Qigong is really good. You know, you awake your body sensations through tapping like this. These actually really are scientifically proven, actually, although they're ancient traditions. Yes.
So when we start to feel that we lose control, we
Yes.
can actually take control back. So how do we take, we have to take action, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So as I was mentioning, that's the stabilization techniques, but actually on the long term, you have to build your resources. And the building of resources comes through self-care. So I've noticed that the people who come to see me, especially, our age, like 20s to 40s, are very busy and working really hard. So they're kind of like running at 100 miles an hour already. And then COVID comes crashing down and everything kind of stops. And then they're bewildered. They're like, what's going on, you know? And so they become disoriented a lot. And I would help them to realize that, what's been happening, like reflect in the past. And they can see that they haven't had much of self-care. It's been chaotic. And at this point in time, because of COVID, some people are laid off. And then the people who are remaining, they have to do more than they once did too. It could lead to burnout, They're also feeling guilty too. So both physical self-care as well as mental self-care is so important. So I work with people to go through their schedules, as I've said before, if their routines are able to are healthy enough as well. Do they get enough rest? Do they get enough of the good food and vegetables and proteins and things so that they balance their inflammation process within their body and so it doesn't cause excess stress on their body, or the exercise, the movements that help them to feel in touch with their bodies as well as give them that energy to go through the day, even sunlight. Still, you have social distancing, but you can still go out if you are careful to get that needed light for yourselves and things like that. The same is with mental self-care, body-mind exercises, as I've said, as well as are you in touch with your feelings? This is a main part of my work too, is helping people to be in touch not just with their bodies, but with their feelings, because they've gone through a lot of feelings which they don't know what these feelings are.
And they don't know how to process these feelings.
And they don't know how to process it. And one of the things that really help is just naming it, naming the feelings. So I have this chart for them and they can go through the vocabularies that they might never ever learned in their families about how they feel. You're sad, you're angry, but what kind of sad? Are you depressed? Are you lonely? Are you devastated? Are you feeling despair or defeat? Are you helpless? Just by naming it will help them feel that sense of, aha, I know now. And there's a relief that comes with that. And you don't get sucked into it too. Somehow that is how the mind works. You don't get sucked in it once you know what you're dealing with. It's like as if you see the predator that's threatening you and you know what to do now. But before that, you don't know what's threatening you, so you don't know what to do, and you're in the sense of loss and panic. So that happens to a lot of my patients once they are able to identify their feelings. Then I help them, maybe suggest to them to journal it or to talk about it with their loved ones. Of course, we're not going to let them dwell on these feelings. That's different. If you dwell on it too much, if you keep repeating and repeating and going through the trauma like that, that's not helpful. But processing is helping you discover what is it you need, what is it you want, how can you request it, letting the feelings tell you what you need, and then letting that feeling go. You felt it, thank it. Okay, thank you, anger. You're here to let me know that someone hurt me. And now I know what's the problem. Now I have to deal with the problem. But I don't have to use anger for anything else. I can let you go now. So feeling is like an alarm system. Just let it tell you things and not be afraid of it, and then thank it and let it go. So this is the mental self-care that I talk to my patients about. And of course, then out of yourself, then you connect with loved ones. this is very funny. After COVID happened, one of the things that's really great is the virtual communities that happen all over the world. Even my daughter was connected to a lot of that. They sing together, they play games together. So we as human beings have the capacity to be so creative. We can still connect to nature in places of positive energy. I tell my patients all the time, if you can, start building places where you can go there and feel good. Bring people you love to that place. And once you have that connection with that place, when you feel really flooded and down, you go to that place, the positive energy comes back to you. The last thing I see a lot of people do during COVID is they start to see that the time that they, like suppose they can't go out anymore, and the things that they used to enjoy, they don't know what to do anymore, or they don't have a job anymore, they turn that into an opportunity to learn more. Learn things online, self-development. So lots of things are now online for people to learn. Some are even free. So you can try to get access through these resources like that. And the last one, I think that's a huge one, is when people are connected. Now, this is a time when you, a lot of people tell me after a while, the COVID has actually opened up a time for them to be with themselves, with their loved ones, and also with their own spirituality, with their life purpose, maybe connecting to something bigger, like many people are talking about God or nature, and finding a way to have this deep peace and hope. As if the material things of this world that they were used to, like, you know, consuming, running after the society and things like that, they start to question that, and they start to come back to themselves and ask themselves what it is that really is for them, that they really want for themselves. That's more lasting, you know. So COVID has turned into that as well. It's stressful, but it could be a place of spiritual growth and transformation. Yeah.
So if you know, you're here on your own and you try to do all of these things, but you still feel that you're getting nowhere. You still feel that you're stuck. What can I do? If I'm in a place where I feel I've done everything already and I still feel stuck? Okay.
I want to show you something that when patients, and even myself, when we start to do many things that I've told you, one of the key points that you'll learn and hopefully discover is that you'll have to select the one that really matches you and slowly create this routine that is yours. So if you're still finding yourself in a state of, oh, this is good, that is good, I'll just do more of this, more of that. People say to do this, people say to do that. And you're all over the place trying to find the thing that's good for you. Then that might feel stuck as well. But if you could take it one day at a time, put up something like, okay, maybe the central part of my life is about rest. Okay, so maybe like this butterfly here that I have up, you have inside of yourself that sense of peace and rest. And of course, on one side, the wing is you warm up to the day. Maybe you have some routines to warm up, whether it's a lot of people use exercise and movements, and then maybe some journaling or devotions, and then maybe to spike themselves up, something to set their goals for the day. And then they go out like a butterfly to this flower, that flower, to this heart, that heart. Connect to people, connect to things that they want to do. But at the end of the day, they wind down and then they rest again. And this is one day at a time approach. But of course, if you feel still very stuck, you know, the other thing that we can still do is to go, if you can't maintain in yourself, then you may have to seek professional help or even help from other people who can help you. And what happens in this help, like the way patients come and see me, is they feel listened to. And when I talk about listening, I love this character, the Chinese character that's put up here. Is when you listen not just with your ears, you listen with your eyes. You listen with your heart, and you become one with that other person. as if I don't know why the king is there, but maybe it's because that person is now the center of where you are going to see. And there's a family therapist called Satir who talks about this iceberg where you don't just see a person in their behavior, you see deeper down, like their feelings, their perceptions, their expectations, their yearnings, until you reach that point where you can understand the self of that person. And when that person is seen like that, it's so comforting, even through all the circumstances. And one of the things that therapy does is it creates that feeling of being seen, but that person also become aware of what's going on with them. And this connection within the self at a deeper level might reveal the mystery of why you're still stuck. You know, what past trauma is being triggered at this point from what's the COVID's happening. Maybe it's not the present day issue at all. Maybe it's something else. Or when I do family therapy, is there a communication issue going on in the relationship? Is there an attachment that is broken? You know, we as a family are related to each other through a bond that's very special, and it's called the attachment bond. And in this bond, couples or mother and daughter, father and son, they would go, and it really matters if they feel they're heard, they're seen, and do they matter to the other person. And so during the COVID time, when we are very vulnerable and feel a sense of intense feelings, stabilization helps. Self-help, self-care helps. But if you are still feeling like alone or not connected deeply, it can still be destabilizing, especially when you're triggered in fear. The last thing is, if you're still really stuck and having PTSD, I feel like the EMDR therapy, which is one of the practice that I do, where we actually stimulate the brain both sides by eye movement, and brings a person to review the past of their trauma, and they can actually be released from certain distressing memories through this technique. So in combination with the current present circumstances where they restore themselves within themselves, within their family and their relationships, they also restore their past. And it's a very complex and complete process. Of course, I also sometimes access the help of psychiatrists who give some medications as well if a person is really suicidal or having panic attacks that really destabilize them. And the techniques that I'm using, or the talking that I'm doing, or even the EMDR that I'm doing is not quick enough to stabilize them. I access this first too. And then in combination with the medication and what I'm doing in therapy, they can then later on take off from the medication, and they could find the root causes and help them transform. Another very important field of doctors that I also love to let my patients go to is the functional med doctor or the anti-aging doctors. They might do hormone panels or you know, maybe some vitamins, or because some people are very stressed and so much of their hormones are in havoc, so much of their stress hormones need to come down, and there's such a lot of inflammation processes going on. So a lot of my patients have benefited from taking the vitamin infusions and things like that, or even take some hormones to help them reduce their stress. You know, so I use a combination of many things so that they could really feel the difference and reset themselves straight through. Yeah. And finally, I think when people come to that point where they could restore themselves and their relationships, they can find that this is the COVID is like, it has its own silver lining in this cloud, where it seems like a dark cloud at first, but there's meaning in there that they could find through and through. And as a collective community, so I like to use the butterfly, you know, if you're just one lone butterfly, you kind of like, the storm comes and you can't survive, you know. But I've seen butterflies, they come together and they go on this tree, and they're a whole colony and they're together. And I think that's important as we go through COVID, that we go through it together, and be that butterfly that really has the rest and the routines and the connection together. And I think we'll get through this
Yes.
time.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, so there you have it. Dr. Jinda has given us a lot of advice and recommendations how to cope with stress in this time of uncertainties, in the time where COVID-19 has disrupted our lives in so many ways, and also how we can actually get in touch with our own selves and take control of our own lives and move it forward. And even if you feel stuck, then we're able to offer this type of help for you through counseling, through medication, and physical rehabilitation. We do have questions right now. I think we can move to our question and answer portion.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, so most people are impatient about COVID-19. When will it go away? Why does it still keep staying? When will the vaccine start having its effect? And so what's your advice for people who, just can't wait for COVID to get over?
I think the feeling is mutual. It's very normal that everyone is feeling in this way. It's understandable, but I take comfort in the fact that if we step back and look at history and time, like I said, the war, we are a generation that has met a time of peace, and so we've never really know how long and how much suffering the war is, like the way our grandparents, actually my grandparents did. And so if you want, at first just step back and see that we're just going through an era like the people in the past did, and they've survived. So we will survive. And another thing is you can go back and talk to the people of that generation. How did they go through it? They went through it 4 or 5 years.
Right.
We're in our second year.
Yeah.
So yes, it's hard, but I guess it's a time to develop that kind of patience that we don't have because we were in a generation that doesn't have to go through something like this. And another thing is a silver lining. If we can navigate our way through it, it's not about tolerating it.
Right.
We can start to enjoy it
And take control.
and take control and go through it. Yes.
Okay, so that was a question from Mr. Abdus Salam.
Yes.
We have one question from Arif Khan. So it says, in new normal life, we can't be active compared to our previous times.
Yes.
So, what can we do?
I think we are used to being active as a collective level. Like we go to the gym, and then if we want to go outside to, to different places, we go together. And we go in big groups, or we go out to places, and you kind of like traveling has been a part of our lives so much, and we travel in masses, and so those things mean that we connect it to active, being active. But actually we might have to learn to uncouple that. That being active may not look like that, but it doesn't mean we're not going to be active. We can still, maybe as a family, exercise together, go to a place that's more, not so much people, maybe the park instead of the gym, or maybe have a room in your house if you have the space to exercise. I exercise in just my room too. But we have YouTube now, so we can look at YouTube instead. So we have to be creative. Or traveling. We might have to travel by car. We might have to go to less places, but we can be creative about how to be active in that place. Most people in the past travel by sightseeing, but now maybe you might learn a different way of traveling, like you go as a family and settle in a place where it's maybe your home or a safe place away from people, and then enjoy activities together as a family, or go explore nature together. So you can still, I think, be active.
So I think one thing that we are able to do now is, spend more time together with family.
Yes.
And so we could also organize activities within our family, have some family time, do some activities together, play some board games together. This will build our family relationship, make it stronger in the also.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical activity. It could be different types of activity.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Also, I noticed some of my patients also, they, because they have kids, you know, so they interact more with just a few families, like 2-3 families with their kids get together, play soccer together and things like that, because kids still need that physical activity level. There's so much energy still within, and it's not really healthy to keep that. So it's not just within your own family. You can also have it with a couple of families where you talk to each other and you keep each other safe, like you practice the same level of safety, of protection from COVID, and can be trusted to keep each other safe. So then I think we're starting to develop this kind of people with different pockets of community that you can thrive together. Yes.
Okay. So I think the question from Ayan Rahman is similar too. It says, how to stay active during the COVID-19 quarantine? Yeah, so there are different ways. You can be physically active, or you could have a community activities where it's permitted.
Or online. Now a lot of
activities.
people are doing things online, you know, and if for some people being online, they find it hard to connect because it's just in front of the screen.
Right.
Some people might have, like what I do sometimes, I'm like looking at the screen and people are talking, and sometimes also color too.
Right.
You know,
Multitask.
it's almost like multitask, but actually I'm building concentration to that very calming way of coloring through as I'm looking. You know, I'm not focused on the coloring. It's just maybe the activity that I'm doing right here, so I can stay. Because some people may have this sensation of being in front of the computer and not really connecting with the person. It doesn't feel right. So trying to acclimate yourself towards that, you might have certain activities, or you might hold something like soft, you know, and feel more comforted. So be aware. Maybe there's something that's bothering you as you are trying to get through this activity. Instead of saying to yourself, I give up, this doesn't work. Believe in yourself. As humans, we can adjust. We can habituize ourselves in a different way.
Okay. Oh, this is a very interesting question. Quite difficult, I think. From Mr. Moshir Rahman.
Yeah.
Some people already affected and already cured. So I think people already had COVID and now they're well.
Yeah.
But socially they are harassing. So that's difficult. And how can they overcome? Or how
So
can
they're
we
being
overcome?
socially harassed? Is that what's happening?
But socially they are, yeah, I think so.
I think this is something that we also observed in when we heard some of the news where, and this is part of the COVID stress syndrome too, foreigners, people are afraid of foreigners who might be carriers of the disease. And we see behaviors where you're avoiding, you know, or what you've touched and where you've been, you know.
Or you've just been discharged from the hospital.
Yes, or people who are sick, yes, or even medical personnel like us are all in this group, you know, where people are afraid and in fear of you. And then some are rightly so because they have cancer, they have immune compromised diseases, they're pregnant, they're children. So there's this disparity, like, I don't want to connect with you. And it could really hurt, you know, to be felt like, you know, you're being afraid, discriminated. One of the things is both sides. The side that is really fearful and avoiding may need to, as I've said, get the facts straight, you know, learn to calm yourself. Is this your stress reaction or is this reality? If you do have illnesses or vulnerable to COVID, then obtain adequate protection. But you can separate it from all that intense fear. On the other side, if you're the person who's being, you know, discriminated, stabilize your own emotions and don't take it too personal because people are like I said, allow everyone to cope. They do go through that stage of fear, but it might not be forever. They might have been going through a dip, but they might come out of it. If we're patient enough, people will pull through and we can still be friends or, live together.
Right.
Yeah.
This is another question that I'm sure a lot of people think about. How to take care of sick people that are afraid, since they're afraid to go to the hospital?
Oh. Actually, a lot of medical care facilities, including Bumrungrad, are having what we call teleconsultations or telemedicine. Yeah, this is even eye contact with my friends in the U.S. Almost all of their therapy are now online. Yes, and they're finding that is really useful because people love it. They're here, they're in their homes, in their comfort, and they can talk and very private.
Right.
But it's not just for mental health. Physically, in Bumrungrad we have, I think you know more than me, we have labs. You can go out and take lab tests and send medication home. You talk online with your doctor. Yes, there might be that side where the doctor can't really feel you. So there's some conditions that you do need to come in, but there's some conditions you don't need. There's just a follow-up is adequate. So hopefully that will take the burden off for you and actually being telemedicine, instead of having to come in, if there's something that you have a quick question, there's a variety of different services to get an answer now online. So actually, people are finding it much more easier in that way to care for a loved one who's sick.
Well, on the other hand, you might be scared to come to the hospital.
Yes.
But Bumrungrad does have a lot of infection control processes in place. We screen all the patients that come in, temperature screening, and also we take the history of their travel and what types of symptoms they're experiencing. So you can be assured that when you come to Bumrungrad International, you are in a safe place, in a disease-free area that is always being screened and cleaned according to standard. So you might not want to come to the hospital. You can avail of the telemedicine services. Pharmacy can send your medications also. And we can also take labs from your home. But on the other hand, it's also safe to come to our hospital.
Yes, and also, as I've said before, if you are able to regulate your emotions, then you are clear with what you need to do to protect yourself and develop as a routine. Wear the mask. When you want to touch your face, when you want to eat, you wash your hands. Everything else, you can say, okay, we don't know what it is. So you don't have to be afraid of it, but you just have to protect yourself. And then when you go home, you protect your loved ones. Yeah.
All right, so I think we've come to the end of our session. It has been a very pleasant discussion. It's my pleasure to have been able to talk to you and listen to the different advices that you have that I think is very relevant to everybody that is watching us. So thank you very much, Dr. Jinda. And thank you all also for joining us this afternoon. If you like the content that we have provided this afternoon, say so in the comments below, or you could also click the like button, and I'd like you to subscribe too, so that you won't miss any other further content that we would be sharing, and you can catch us live too. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a pleasant day.